time, I will call the April Conservation Authority meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to note that we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. At this time, before the disclosure of pecuniary interest, I'll just note that we are joined online by members Hall and members Farmer, and we do have quorum in the chambers here as well. So, are there any items of disclosure or of pecuniary interest to be noted by members at this time? Not seeing any. Call for additional agenda items. At this time, are there any from members? Not seeing any. Item 4 is a motion to adopt the agenda, and I note that it is revised. The revision occurred this morning just as a small publish or republishment on the items of business before us. Any questions to that, or do I have a mover of that motion as revised? And member Dubik has so moved, seconded by member Yurig. All those in favor? And that is adopted. Thank you. Item 5 is approval of the authority minutes from March 25th, 2026. Are there, I'll actually entertain a mover to adopt those. Member Winters has so moved, seconded by member Maxwell. Are there any questions, comments to those minutes? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Item 6 is business out of the minutes. We have none at this time, so we are to the consent agenda under item 7. I would entertain a motion to receive. Member Dubik has so moved, seconded by member Day. Are there any questions, items of concern, or items to be withdrawn or pulled to speak to separately? Not seeing any. All those in favor of receipt? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we're quickly down to business items at this time. We're flying compared to the last committee meeting. We're all excited to have the tour of the admin center. So we've got a few business items on the agenda this afternoon. And the first item is the Q1 work plan interim report. And at this time, I will welcome Tim to the meeting and pass the microphone to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So everybody has a copy of the interim report in their board package today. You'll recall that we set a rather ambitious work plan this year with about 146 items on it versus the around 50 that are normally showing on it, but thought that as we move forward with striving towards achieving the goals of our strategic plan, it was important to show all of the work that the team is doing to move the needle in this regard. So what we see today is what I would say is very strong progress to date on the work plan. About 18% of the total projects for the year are complete. And between complete and on track, about 62% are within that category right now. There are several not started, and that's standard for this time of year in a first quarter report. And I think as we move through the year, you'll see those projects start to roll, but they typically have later start dates. There are a few timeline amendments to note, but nothing at risk at this point. So the record retentions policy is moved from March to June. The work that we will need to do with the province if the transition moves forward has been changed from to be announced to February 2027. The move back to the building work with our IT service provider has moved from March to May to correspond with that actual move to the building. Volunteer recruitment webpage, April to May. A review of Google and Square comments, March to May. Client service standards for planning from April to July, municipal screening guide for planning work from April to May. Quotes for the Arboretum Trail. So we do want to resurface the Arboretum Trail this year and make it fully accessible as defined by the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And that has been moved from May to June, but we hope to get those quotes so that we can start a fundraising campaign around that one. And the Spirit Rock Management Plan from June to August, as our lands manager is on parental leave this year, and so we just need a bit of time to regroup for ourselves there. There's also a few items that I wanted to point out for the board that have been marked as complete, but at 0% as opposed to 100%. And the reason for that is that they may be redundant in light of the merger that's pending. So some of these we did a review of our current benefits with the staff or for the staff team, and we'll be presenting those to the staff tomorrow. And what that is a comparison of how our benefits package compares to our municipal partners, our neighboring CAs in the counties. And the next step was going to be to look at renegotiating those. That may not be something that we want to do right now, pending the merger, where we'll be looking at, how does this fit into the bigger picture? The 360 review of the CAO may or may not be necessary, so we can talk to the board about that. That one has not been listed as complete at this point. It's been listed as not started. Our long-term strategic plan tracker. So we will launch our short-term one soon, the in-year tracker, so everybody in the public can see how we're tracking. But the long-term one over the 10-year may be redundant at this point. As well as admin bylaw updates for board of directors performance standards. So I just wanted to bring those items to the board's attention, but otherwise, I think the team's doing an amazing job. There's a lot to do on this plan, and it's really flying ahead and happening. So with that, through you, Mr. Chair, I'd welcome any questions or comments the board may have.
Thank you. And are there any questions from members this afternoon? Member Dubik.
Thank you very much, Tim, for the update. So first off, congratulations for all the great work that's been done to date. And thank you very much for the color coding, super helpful and very clear, so love it. You did mention at the top about the clarity from the province merger activities moving to Feb 2027. Wondering if you have any line of sight to the amount of resourcing that may take for yourself and for your team.
Unfortunately, at this time, I don't. So we'll talk about it a little bit in the next agenda item, but unfortunately, the information is being parsed out piecemeal, and we're not getting a lot of detail at this point.
Are there any further questions for Tim from this report? Not seeing any, so we do have a motion to receive this report as information. Member Bell has so moved, and a seconder in Member Winters. Any further questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Tim. Next item is the CA update. And back to Tim to introduce this item.
There's a presentation to go along with this, so I'm not sure what the best mechanism to have that up is.
For member,
I can go, but I can.
oh,
I can join and share.
Oh, there. Okay. There, we're just pulling this up for your benefit, members Hall and members Farmer. We're just deciding on the best way to put it on the screen here.
I'll just confirm member Farmer and member Hall that you can see the presentation now. Great, thank you. So we've talked quite a bit over the last, I don't know. We've certainly talked quite a bit over the last 6 months about the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. So I've kept this presentation rather high level to just cut to the chase on what we know now. So when we met at the board meeting last month, I had mentioned that the changes to the CA Act had, like, the decision of the province had been announced and that the changes of the legislation was expected imminently. Apparently imminently meant the very next day. So on March 26, Bill 97, which is the budget measures bill, was released, and in Schedule 3 to that bill, there are substantial changes to the Conservation Authorities Act that cover statutory amalgamation, transition committees, project executives, and transition plans, prohibitions during the transition period, governance of regional CAs, and some other amendments. So the timeline to date is that on April 15th of last year, there was the throne speech with the budget that was released at that time. And the only mention of conservation authorities at the time was that a common sense conservation principles were going to be applied to the role of conservation authorities. And no further detail was provided. So essentially, we were waiting for the other shoe to drop to see what that meant. At the end of October of 2025, there was an announcement from the province that they planned to merge Ontario's 36 conservation authorities into 7, and that they were planning to create a new agency that fell between the conservation authorities in the province called the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency, or OPCA. On November 6th, the legislation that would enshrine OPCA was released. And later in November, that legislation received royal assent. On November 7th, a consultation process began for the consolidation of conservation authorities. And then through November and December of last year, the province carried out some forms of consultation on this. What we do know, as I mentioned previously, is that about 14,000 comments were received by the province. Of the 4,800 comments that were publicly available, about 97.5% of those opposed to this amalgamation. On March 10th this spring, so last month, the province announced its decision to move forward with the amalgamation, noting that they've listened to the comments that they've received and they're moving forward. So I think that needs to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. So they've listened to what they've received in terms of some of the ideas for how this could work. They do not seem to have listened in terms of the broad majority of the public opposing this proposed action. Nonetheless, they have moved forward, and as I mentioned, on March 26, Bill 97 was introduced. So for the statutory amalgamation piece, which is what will create the mergers, there's a transition date set of February 1st, 2027, in which the existing conservation authorities will merge into what will now be 9 conservation authorities. So as I mentioned at last meeting, the change here from 7 to 9 reflects that Thunder Bay Lakehead will no longer be part of the Lake Huron Region Conservation Authority, and that the Lake Erie Regional Conservation Authority will be split into east and west. So for Grey Sauble, or the Lake Huron Region Conservation Authority, that will consist of Lake Simcoe region to the far east of us, which brings in the city of Kawartha Lakes and then heads westward from there. Nottawasaga Valley along the southeastern coast of Georgian Bay, Grey Sauble, and then heading down Lake Huron, Saugeen Valley, Maitland Valley, and a Sauble Bayfield. So in total, this extends from about the city of Kawartha Lakes to just south of Grand Bend, and a total size of 22,000 square kilometers. Which, as we've noted previously, is about the size of a small Central American country, or 4 times the size of the province of Prince Edward Island. So I won't linger on these, but this map does show where Grey Sauble sits today and the other 35 conservation authorities within the province. And then this following map released by the province shows where those regions are, and you can see Grey Sauble sort of central within the Lake Huron Regional Conservation Authority. Some of the concerns regarding amalgamation were going to be around what happens with debt, liabilities, assets, obligations, agreements, MOUs, existing permits that are in process, hearings that are within process. all of those items will transfer. So whatever of those items is part of Gray Sauble now will become part of Lake Huron Regional Conservation Authority, and likewise for all of the other CAs that will be joining us. This also applies to our current regulations officers for both development and lands. Already approved or delegated regulations officers of the GSCA will become regulations officers automatically of the Lake Huron RCA. Governance is one of the biggest changes that's being proposed. So under the new iteration, obviously under the existing system, Gray Sauble has 8-member municipalities with 11 represented members from those municipalities, all lower tiers. And this is generally true throughout the province. There are some CAs throughout the province that have the single tiers. So Halton region area, York region for Lake Simcoe, but by and large, it's the lower tiers. In the new iteration, lower tiers will no longer be participating municipalities. So your municipalities will no longer sit at the table of Conservation Authority boards. Upper and single tier municipalities will become the participating municipalities. So for Gray Sauble, that is largely Gray County and Bruce County. Governance reps will be provided from each of these upper or single tier municipalities, and it's intended to still be representation by population. But we don't know what those trigger numbers are anymore. So right now it's 0 to 1 shy of 10,000, 10,000 to 1 shy of 100,000, and so on. What we do know is that there are 15 upper and single tier municipalities within the new region, and the boards are expected to be 15 to 20 members in size. So based on that, what we can expect is that the rural upper tier municipalities will have 1 member apiece. So Gray County would have 1 member, Bruce County would have 1 member. And some of the more urban areas with a higher population density would have more. So speculatively, that could mean within our region that York region maybe gets 3, City of Barrie gets 2, City of Newmarket gets 2, and all of the rest get 1. This new governance structure is legislated to take place on February 1st, 2027, unless the Lieutenant Governor in Council changes that. And apportionment is intended to be determined the same way, but we haven't seen those models yet to see how that plays out. We also don't know what the interaction will be between the upper tiers and the lower tiers in terms of recouping that, because currently the lower tiers will have this funding built into their budget because you've been paying it every year. The upper tiers do not have this built into their budget because they haven't been paying it every year. And so how that relationship is going to work between the upper and lower tiers in terms of coordinating for the apportionment that will now go to the upper tiers, we'll have to see what that looks like. After 2027, the new participating municipalities, so the upper tiers, will be apportioned the cost. In 2027, we've been told that our existing municipalities will be apportioned the cost. The interesting thing to note here is that what this means is that in 2027, our lower tier municipalities will receive the apportionment, the levy bill, but you will not sit on the board. So the board will be made up effective February 1st of members from the upper tier municipalities. That's all I know about that right now. I look forward to your support at your municipal councils when I have to tell them that. So the transformation and the transition period. So the transition plans will be developed by a transition committee. As we talked about last time, the transition committee will be comprised of the CAO from each existing conservation authority, plus 1 elected member from each conservation authority. So for us, all of you as board members are elected, but for some CAs, that's not the case. And OPCO or the province will appoint a project executive who will not work for OPCA. And so we've been left not sure who that person will work for. OPCA, or the Chief Conservation Executive, Hassan Bassett, has alluded to that project executive coming from the CA world. So either an existing CA staff person or a former CA staff person, but they've alluded to it not being somebody random. These transition committees will develop transition plans.
I'll just recognize Member Urick with a question at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I didn't know if you want to save questions till the end, but it's relevant. So OPCA being kind of coming into play, is there any transparency on what happens to Conservation Ontario? At this point, they've been the advocacy for all of the agencies or the authorities. And I've nothing in your report, and I've looked online. I can see nothing, any reference to Conservation Ontario. Any talk about that whatsoever?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, when so we had a briefing meeting with the ministry and OPCA on about 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the Hassan Bassett at that time alluded again to Conservation Ontario remaining, but couldn't tell us in what capacity or if that would be true for sure. But he did allude to it, so at this point, it's a wait and see. Yeah, so moving forward, the transition plans need to be prepared by February 1st, prepared and approved by that time. Following royal assent of Bill 97, the minister is expected to issue temporary directions to prohibit certain decisions within the transition period. They're using the term guardrails for this, and some of the items that they've mentioned in passing could be things like the acquisition or disposition of lands over that time. I would note that Bill 97 and the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act prohibit municipalities from creating, amalgamating, dissolving, or otherwise changing a conservation authority between now and the transition period. So municipalities can't decide that we just don't want to do this, is essentially what that means. That project executive that's appointed by the province, inaugural CAO for the new Regional Conservation Authority for a period of up to 2 years. And we think that the reason for that is that will be what we will call a transition or a transformation period. So there's no way that everything is happening by February 1st of 2027. There's too much to do. So we expect that the plans will be in place and ready for the new boards to implement by February 1st. And then that next 2-year period will be the timeline to align programs and services and systems, essentially. So what we can expect moving forward is reduced local input, as we talked about. That's just the reality of it. If an area that currently Grey Sauble has 11 members and Saugeen Valley has 15 or 18 members, and that's going to go down to 2, one for Bruce County and one for Grey County, that's obviously substantially less representation for our area. The transition process and future regulations are going to define a lot of the details that we don't know right now. However, we still won't know these things until late summer or early fall, and they're talking about early fall for the regulations. So still a lot of information to come. No programs or land ownership management are expected to change in the short term as an immediate result of the amalgamation. But future RCA boards, just like this board has the ability to make decisions on programs and services and land holdings, those future boards will as well. Each RCA is to establish one or more watershed councils, but when, what, and how are to be defined in regulation, and we don't expect those regulations until the fall. And Mr. Bassett has also stated that it won't be a priority to get those watershed councils up and running, recognizing the other work that needs to happen to merge the organizations. So moving forward, the timeline is going to be royal assent of Bill 97. Then the minister will issue directions. OPCA will gear up and start asking for information from us. They'll appoint project executives for the transition committees. The committees will form. And so we will, within 90 days of royal assent, need to appoint a board member to this transition committee. The transition committees will develop the transition plans, and OPCA will review those and either approve them or ask for changes. By the end of this year, we're supposed to have our 2027 budgets complete. And I think I mentioned previously, we'll actually probably aim for September because our October board meeting falls after the municipal election. And then the counties need to appoint their first members prior to February 1st, 2027. So I will be talking to the CAOs at the counties about this to make sure they're aware, because we'll be coming pretty much right out of the municipal election. Councils will just be getting set up themselves and then starting to appoint to other committees. So that is sort of very high level, Mr. Chair, and I at this time welcome any questions or comments from the board.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And I'll recognize Member Bell first and then Member Days next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this entire package that we're looking at is very much like a business transaction, whether hostile or friendly, in a business takeover. So on page 51, and just as the graphs that we looked at just a few moments ago, on page 51, it says that the minister is expected to issue temporary directions to prohibit certain decisions. Then I'd like to take you back to page 49, where it says all of the rights, the obligations, assets, and liabilities are transferred over. Assets, cash. We have cash. Would the minister not allow us right now to do something outstanding with our cash in this community before that cash as an asset gets turned over into the great melting pot of the entire conglomeration? I'm thinking that when they say assets, everything tangible, hard and real, but it also says they're going to take over our liabilities. And what we have is an opportunity, I think, before the minister issues a hard decision limiting us on what we can not do. What is the opinion from my fellow members that we should do something before the minister ties our hands that we can't do something in a lateral motion? That's my concern. They're taking it over for better and worse, for richer or poorer. It's a business transaction because it concludes too on page 49, all the employees, all of it. They're going to take it all in. So that's a takeover from the assets and from our liabilities. Can we do something, or is there an appetite to do something? And legally, right now, Mr. CAO, can we do something with our hard cash? Or is that getting on the fringes of what we can do? Thank you.
Thanks, Member Bell. I'll go to Tim for a response.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things, Member Bell. So first off, to answer the question about could we do this right now before the minister issues directions, the answer is yes. There's nothing precluding us from operating the way we did a year ago, 2 years ago right now, because the legislation hasn't passed. But that being said, it's not the ministry taking this over. It's Grace Sauble consolidating with 5 other conservation authorities. And I want to caution the board very seriously about pursuing options that would spend our reserves or spend all of our cash, because we will still need those in the future. And if all 6 conservation authorities said we're just going to divest ourselves completely of all our cash holdings and all of our assets, what's going to happen is we're going to come together as the Lake Huron Regional Conservation Authority, and we're going to still have all of these assets that need refurbishment, all of the liabilities that we have to deal with, and we're not going to have any resources left to do that work. So although there's a risk that not all of our finances may be spent within Grace Sauble's current watershed, there's also an opportunity that more money might be spent within Grace Sauble's watershed, because it goes both ways and we're just becoming part of a bigger team. So I think whereas there are, and I should have mentioned this during the presentation, I think whereas there are challenges in terms of governance, for sure, that are not positive, in my opinion, in terms of how this is rolling out, there are also great opportunities here in terms of when we think about our staff team and the opportunities that exist for our current, but also our future staff in terms of what I see as our greater ability to attract and maintain high quality staff, because I would envision that there's more opportunity for upward movement within a larger organization than there is within a small organization. So that's definitely a positive. I would assume greater expertise as we partner with our other neighboring CAs. So again, I think it's important to be clear too. We like our neighboring CAs. They're good organizations, just like we're a good organization. What is negative about this, though, is just the way the governance structure is being run, and the fact that we're being forced into this by the province, and the fact that at the end of the day, this probably will cost more. But I do caution the board very, very seriously about making hasty decisions on divesting of our reserves.
Okay, thanks for that question, Member Bell. I'll go to Member Day, then Member Farmer next.
I have 3 questions, but I definitely don't need to ask them all at the same time. I'm happy to share the mic. I'll start with the third one that I thought of. The transition committee would be selected before the municipal elections, but continue after the municipal election. Can you speak to how a possible turnover on who is on the transition committee could impact this process?
Yeah, this has been an important question that we've been asking OPCA as well. What we've been told is that our board of directors will continue to be the board of directors until February 1st, or until such time prior to that your municipality appoints another person. So what they're saying is that if you don't run for office again, or you run and you are not successful, you're still a member of this board until your municipality appoints someone else or February 1st happens.
Thank you. I understand that some other boards work that way as well, like the library board. I'm beginning to learn more about how all this works. Would you like me to ask my other questions while I'm here? I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned costs, CAO, to both the upper and lower tier in 2027, and I'm not quite sure I understood that fully. There would be cost proportion to the upper tier as well as cost proportion to the lower tier, or would it just be rolled into what the lower tiers give to the county already?
So in 2027, CAs will continue to apportion our lower tier municipalities the same way we do now, even though the board will consist of members from the upper tier municipalities. Post 2027, so 2028 and onwards, the regional conservation authorities will apportion the levy to the upper tiers. And how that relationship between the upper and lower tiers works, we're uncertain about at this point. So what I was getting at is that currently lower tiers have that in their budget and upper tiers do not, because currently we're apportioning the lower tiers, not the upper tiers. When that relationship changes, the counties and the municipalities will have to figure out, how does that money now transfer from the lower tiers where you already have that money to the upper tiers who are now going to have to pay the bill.
Thank you for clarifying. And my last question is about the timeline. This bill has been introduced, but it hasn't yet received royal assent. Does this feel like the time when we should be still fighting and making our voices heard, especially for municipalities that maybe haven't spoken up in opposition of this merger? Or is it time to acquiesce and look for those positives that you started bringing to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, both, I think. So right now, the bill has been deferred to standing committee. So there's an opportunity for municipalities, if you're not happy with this, to reach out to your MPP to write letters to the minister. We recently saw the mayors of Mississauga and Brampton do this, who represents the Credit Valley Conservation Authority and a huge portion of Ontario's population. I think it would behoove the process for mayors of all of our municipalities that do not agree with this to write those types of letters, if for nothing else, to put it on the record. At a staff level, however, I think it's time for us to start preparing for this transition, because once it goes to standing committee, it will quickly thereafter receive royal assent, unless for whatever reason they backpedal, and then this timeline will start rather aggressively.
Okay, thanks for those questions. I'll go to Member Farmer and then Member Maxwell next.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First to the CAO, you mentioned looking for support as the consequences of this are explained to our respective municipalities. Is there currently a plan for presentations to member municipalities, or would that just be part of the next budget cycle?
At this point, Member Farmer, in terms of just presenting this type of information, I'm treating that on an by request basis. So I was at Owen Sound's Community Services Committee last night, and I've been in touch with staff at Meaford following up on Member Urig's request at the last meeting. But otherwise, I would be bringing this around at budget time, which looks for like right now it's going to be in the summer. So it'll be interesting to see how we fit into municipal council schedules over the summer. But we'll need to probably bring a draft budget to the board in June, and then the budget for circulation in July, and have that approved in September.
Thank you. I'm in some ways inspired by Member Bell's question, and also thinking about the costs associated with the merger that we were not anticipating in a multi-year capital plan. Even something as simple as updating all of the signs and branding for the Conservation Authority is going to be really expensive and labor intensive, and may come at the expense of capital projects that were otherwise on the to-do list. Is there an opportunity to, like, as we're drafting the budget for next year, to write in some capital projects that may have been further down the line, to prioritize them more immediately, knowing that over the medium and long term we won't have the same opportunity to prioritize projects that we know are important, because there will be additional costs, even just by the simple fact that everybody needs new shirts and business cards.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so that item has come up. Actually, Toronto Region was pushing it pretty hard early on, because in the first iteration of this, Toronto Region wasn't changing at all except for its name. It was going to become the Central Lake Ontario Regional Conservation Authority, but it was going to have exactly the same boundaries. So I should note that was one of the other changes, is they're now swallowing up what's currently the Central Lake Ontario Conservation Authority. But they brought forward an argument to that exact effect of just changing our name is going to cost us like many millions of dollars in terms of signage. The answer from the province was that that's not expected to happen right away, and that those changes would be made when those signs need to be renewed, when new clothes need to be purchased for staff. So for instance, we put a purchase order in for clothes twice a year for staff. So in future iterations of that, they would have a different logo than Grace Sauble's logo. And so that's how the province is proposing that be addressed. However, your point about extra capital up front is a good one, and something we'll definitely look into. The limiting factor for us will be staff resources as opposed to financial resources necessarily there.
I was curious about the timeline for more information about the watershed councils, but you've made that clear that that will be the fall sometime. I'm curious from a kind of just general perspective, whether there's any indication that any organizations are putting FOI requests in to have the other 10,000 comments released. I know that we had maybe questioned that in a previous meeting, and come to the understanding that it wouldn't be a Conservation Authority's place to do that, but just wondering if we've heard anything about increased transparency, knowing that certainly this government has responded to pushback about planes people don't like. And I'm wondering if we'll have similar luck to plans people don't like if there was more clarity on how much we don't like that.
That's an excellent question, Member Farmer. And there is a group that's been doing research into this, and I can check in with them to see if they've FOI'd those or not.
Thank you. That's all of my questions.
Okay, thank you, Member Farmer. Member Maxwell?
Thank you very much. I guess I don't know if there's 2 or 3 questions here, I guess, and it's on these watershed councils. I just trying to understand what the geographic representation area of each of these councils might be. Who will they report to? And will they have any real power to deal with local issues or concerns?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And none of that information has been provided to date. Yeah, we don't know.
Anything further there? Nope. Okay, thanks. Member Maxwell, Member Yurt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at governance and what you said in there, it's funny because I tried to do kind of a basic AI search about what this is going to entail in terms of size. What Member Maxwell just said, even it couldn't really figure it out. It said it's going to be between 75 and 80 municipalities, and it's approximately 12 counties again, because border lines aren't exact, so they're not even sure. So when it comes to the governance and what you had said about, and it's in there, the report talked about a board of 15 to 20. So obviously, again, you're going to say right now, no decisions have been made, but when this comes to discussion about when board voting happens for representation, particularly if it is proportionate by population and some larger entities are going to have more votes, is this going to be a weighted vote situation? How are they going to kind of, look at that eventuality? And I'm sure you probably don't have the answer now, but that's something we're going to have to address to make sure that we do get just say in decisions by our representatives.
Through the chair. Yeah, those are good points. So we've also talked about that. And so it's our understanding that there are 15 between upper tier, like between counties and single tiers. We do expect that with the straight rep by pop, that those more urban developed municipalities will have higher representation on the board. The legislation as it's written right now also allows for all of the municipalities to come to an agreement on a different mechanism other than rep by pop, which might be weighted voting. I would suggest, though, that weighted voting would probably weight it even more in that urban side of things as opposed to the rural side of things, if I had to guess.
Okay, thanks for those questions. Member Dubik, go ahead.
Thank you. So one comment and one question. An update just from Grey Highlands. So I had seen the news about the Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon mayors strongly opposing the Ontario plan to merge the conservation authorities. And so I had moved a motion at our last council meeting for our mayor and council to send a letter again to oppose, to help to strengthen sort of, this development. And so that motion was supported. So again, it's just, something, as Member Day has noted, so that is maybe something, for all of us to consider. A question around the OPCA. So we've heard that, who they may be targeting to step into a project executive position. Is there any clarity of who may be selected for the OPCA positions?
Just to clarify, you're asking who would actually form the staff at OPCA or the board at OPCA? At this point, I don't have answers to that. We expect them to be appointed by the province, but I don't know.
Okay, thanks for all those questions. I certainly think it's quite easy at the local municipal levels to support continuing to advocate still that the current structure does work and it works quite well. And the reason I say that is we've now had, as Tim noted, this was introduced approximately a year ago, and the province hasn't been able to inform me yet how these changes are going to make life better for our residents or better for our municipalities at the local levels. So I think the advocacy is quite easy to speak to, as opposed to if we had seen over the course of a year that it was very clearly articulated how things were going to be better and improve um, lives for residents, particularly after the last week we had with so much rain and the secondary level of flooding in our watershed. They haven't been able to really indicate yet how the value proposition is enhanced with the consolidation, and in that absence, I certainly think it's easy for municipalities to continue to advocate for the best possible outcome. And so far, I think the best possible outcome still is a current status quo that works. So those are my comments. We do have a recommendation to receive this report as information. Do I have a mover? Member Farmer has so moved, seconded by Member Maxwell. Any further questions, comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Sorry, before I go to the next item, Member Bell, did you have a comment there? You just wished to, I saw your hand, but it was too late.
I appreciate you seeing my tentative hand go up, and I do appreciate that. I also appreciate your comments that you had just prior to this, where you said that things could be made better, and that's what they're working toward. My only comment is when we get asked as members of Grey Sauble Conservation, what do you think the changes are going to be like and how it's going to impact us? I think when we look at the very first opening comments about this, that it says the size of the area that this is going to impact. It was bullet point number 4, about 4 times the size of Prince Edward Island. And if we think that we can govern Prince Edward Island times 4, that's kind of the area that we're looking at. So it's just a final comment, as you asked, but I do appreciate your comments, Mr. Chair, when you said there could be the opportunity to be better, and I hope so.
Okay, thanks, Member Bell. So we are to item C under business items, and at this time I will pass it back to Tim to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen again. Okay, and I believe that's sharing on online now. So I just wanted to bring this to the board about everybody here will be aware that we had a land dispute going on at Haibu Conservation Area. The board has discussed this on multiple occasions in closed session for legal reasons. We haven't had a formal report back to the board on this in open session. I had presented it in my CAO report, but not formally. What I'd like to preface this with, though, is that there's information contained in this board agenda that has most of the information that you'll need to know about this property and this dispute and the court hearing that it went underway. If you have questions or comments, I would ask that if they're about any of the information that's contained in the open session portion of this, that feel free to ask those in open session. But if it's anything about next steps or things that we may have discussed in closed session, we do have a closed session item on the agenda today. I would request that the board save those types of questions for the closed session portion. So a bit of background, because not everybody was here when this started, but on the map, we show Haibu Conservation Area. So this is located just north of Owen Sound, just south of the hamlet of Leaf, on the east shore of Owen Sound or Owen Sound Bay. The property is just over 300 hectares in size, and it was purchased in 1972 and 1973 through a lot of dedication from volunteers, some of whom, like Bob Knapp, are now part of the Friends of Haibu. The relevant deed for the property includes meets and bounds description. So if you're not familiar with a meets and bounds description, it essentially says start at point A and go this many feet in this direction to point B and so on to outline the property. And it was registered in the registry system. So the registry system is the old system of land registration. The new system is land titles. And you can see circled on the map the area that became a problem for us in 2020. So up to 2009, in our GIS mapping, which we get from the province through TerraNet, there's a little parcel that you see on the map right now that's circled as separate from the larger holding. Up until 2009, that was not separate in the mapping. It was part and parcel, no pun, with the contiguous lands to the west of it. An error occurred when the lands transferred from land registry to land titles, and this is not uncommon. Typically what happens is if everything in the deed is very clear and clean, the transfer from land registry to land titles went smoothly, and now the property is just in the land title system. If it wasn't clear, it stayed in land registry, and nobody tells you that. And so when you own one property, it's not necessarily a big deal. When you own over 200 properties, it's hard to know. So this uncertainty with the deed, like I said, caused it to be held back in land registry, and that created a new orphaned parcel that is on lot 36, broken front concession in Sydenham instead of lot 37. The majority of the remainder of the property, like I said, was in the move to land titles. This was held back. In 2014, unbeknownst to us, somebody filed a quitclaim deed on this piece of property and sold it to somebody else. I'm going to put sold in quotations. It's questionable what transaction took place, but nonetheless, the title and ownership changed to somebody else, and several other transfers occurred between 2014 and 2020 to create a title of ownership on this orphaned parcel. In April 11th, 2020, we were, a couple of weeks into the COVID pandemic. Everybody was in lockdown, and all of a sudden, Facebook started erupting, and our emails started erupting with complaints that the Conservation Authority was selling off a piece of Haibu. So this is what we saw when we looked online, and this is what we saw when we went out in the field to take a look. That somebody had indeed put a for sale sign up on our property, trying to sell it for this piece of it for $430,000. So we took immediate action. We locked the PIN, so the property identification number, through the land registry office. And the reason we did that is that you can't sell a property if the PIN is locked. So if somebody came to try and buy it, that transaction couldn't go through. And so what we were trying to avoid is bringing somebody else into this dispute. We then filed an application with the court against the vendor. We tried to settle very, very soon after this. The settlement attempts failed. It was a very reasonable settlement. It was pay us for our time up to this point and give us our property back. But that failed. It took 4 years for this to get to court. There was a big slowdown with the courts through the pandemic. We finally had this application heard by the Ontario courts in March of 2024. And we didn't receive the judgment on this until May of 2025. So when we did receive the judgment, we sought and obtained declaration from the court that Sauble is the owner of Haibu. The respondent, so what I'm telling you right now is just a summary of the judgment that the justice put together. The respondent Mr. Dirks asserted title and attempted to sell the land based on a falsified registry of deeds. The court confirmed our ownership dating back to 1973, finding that the PIN that the respondent was using was created through an administrative error, not a break in title. The respondent failed to, their claim failed due to invalid and misdescribed chain of title, including an incorrect legal description. So the legal description, or the meets and bounds that they had for the property, actually described a property 5 doors over that has a house on it and a private citizen owns. And so the court ruled entirely in favor of GSCA, rejecting the fraudulent title scheme, extinguishing all private claims, voiding the road deeds, and ordering correction of the land's records. Then we went for costs on this, and there's 3 different types of costs you can go for. There's partial indemnity costs, there's substantial indemnity costs, and there's full indemnity costs. So substantial is somewhere in the order of 90%, partial is usually around 50%, where you would, essentially cover part of your own legal. And full is reserved for extra special cases like this one. So we sought full and in about $23,000 in legal fees, relying on our success and our early offer to settle. And that was part of the reason that we issued an early offer to settle. The respondent opposed the elevated cost, arguing there was no fraud found and that cost should be limited to partial indemnity. The court was really not happy with this respondent and their actions. They found the respondent's conduct, and this is a quote from the court, especially egregious and reprehensible, highlighting attempts to sell conservation land. And also one of the settlement offers that we received from the respondent was saying that they would relinquish, or they would sign a quit claim deed to us if we issued a charitable receipt of $600,000. So almost $200,000 more than they had the property listed for, and a property that they don't own and we do. So the court was not happy with the respondent, and the court issued us an order for full costs. So where we stand right now is our legal counsel is hammering out the final orders with the respondent's legal counsel so that we can actually take those actions of going to land registry and clearing up the title, and then getting the actual order from the court for the respondent to pay us. So in the package, you'll see the full judgment package, you'll see the full costs package there. So through you, Mr. Chair, I would note for the board that this is a huge success for us. Stressful issue at the time. We certainly didn't want to lose a piece of our property. All signs pointed to it having always been ours. And it's really good to see these 2 judgments from the court.
I think that summarizes it very well. It was certainly a lot of negative community response immediately towards the Conservation Authority for through no fault of our own or no actions of ours, and certainly a lot of time and energy spent trying to clear up this case. So thank you to the courts for recognizing that. Are there any questions from members? Not seeing any. I would entertain a motion to receive as information. I'll go to Member Yurk to move the motion to receive, and with a question as well.
And again, if this steps on the toes of the closed versus open. So it was really nice when the judge literally said it was egregious and reprehensible. So did he at that point not discuss punitive beyond just cost?
No, that punitive damages were not sought or awarded.
Okay, nothing further. Do I have a seconder for a motion to receive as information? Member Winters is so moved or seconded, and no further questions. All those in favor of receiving for information, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we are down to item 8.2A, which is the 2025 annual report from environmental planning. Welcome this afternoon, Clint.
Good afternoon, board members. So this annual report for the planning department is a requirement of Ontario Regulation 68621, where we're required to report on our numbers and of planning files and how we're doing with processing them. So for the 2025 year, you can see in our report that the numbers were down from a planning perspective, almost across the board, with save and except for the city of Owen Sound. This could be a result of a number of market factors and global influences as to why those numbers are down, but it's clear it's not the result of just something happening at a local level. I think it's more broad than that. So overall, we had 281 planning applications last year compared to 470, which is pretty significant drop, but we're hopeful that things will pick up again before too long, and we'll be back to where we were. Although sometimes it's nice to take this time if you're working at a breakneck pace for fast and trying to get things out the door, that to have a slowdown sometimes to reassess how you're doing and maybe make things even better with respect to processing. In terms of the types of applications, the large majority were inquiries, regulation inquiries. There was a number of consents and minor variances as well, and a few Aggregate Resources Act and housekeeping amendments, etc. Moving on then, with respect to permits, we did have a slight increase in the number of permits, which is maybe a little bit unexpected, in that there was a change in the regulation which reduced the area for around wetlands from the 120 meters down to the 30 meters. And so we were anticipating a bit of a lower number of permits, but we did increase a little bit, which is good. So overall, that was pretty good. We also were able to report on the number of permit exemptions, which we had 57, not 570, 57 permit exemptions last year. And we weren't able to track that the previous year. However, we do have tracking for that going forward. So moving on then, we also track the timing and how quickly we move and comment on applications. So within the total permits issued, we had 315 total permits issued. Of that, 113 were major and 202 were minor permits. And then within those, we track the timelines of commenting on them within 21 days for a completeness review, and then a timeline from once that application is complete until the permit is issued and a decision made at 90 days. So overall, we did very well with our timelines. For the 21-day completeness application review, we adhered to an 87% positive rate of applications, and there was also even greater adherence to the formal 90-day one at 97% of all permit applications being having a decision done within that time. So I'll leave it at that and invite questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much for that report, Clint. I'll go to member Maxwell first.
Thank you very much. And the only question I have, I thought I saw somewhere you had a permit issued. I have a little note scribbled down here. Oh, yeah. It was for in Collingwood for on Mandolin Drive, 49 Mandolin Drive. So I'm just trying to, I thought that was kind of not of a Sauble jurisdiction, but I don't know why it would say Collingwood Drive.
Do you have that response off the top of your head? Or you want to give it a go? We have a small slice of the watershed is in Collingwood, but I'll pass it back to Clint.
Yes, through the chair. We do have a small section of our watershed within, it's around the Silver Creek wetland actually area on the west side of Collingwood. That's within our jurisdiction. So there was likely a permit required in that area that we were able to issue a permit for.
Does that help, Member Maxwell, or anything further?
Well, it does, and I'm just wondering if it's goes back to something else that happened a while ago there, and the CEO was kind enough to enlighten me on something. There was a Northeast Grey Conservation Authority, and it was a little chunk that was in Collingwood for some reason that we had Grey Sauble jurisdiction over. And
I'm just going to make sure that any questions are directly related to the information contained and presented in the report, if that's okay. But I would invite you just to speak to Clint or the chair, or sorry, or CAO perhaps after the meeting for clarification there. Any further questions related to the report? Not seeing any. There is a recommendation to receive this as the annual report. Do I have a mover? Member Bell has so moved, seconded by Member Hall. Any further questions? Not seeing. Oh, before I call the vote, Chair Lanthe has a question.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just thought before this is off the table. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank our planning team for all the hard work that they do. It's not often recognized, and more frequently than not, you hear the bad news more than the good news. And I think what we can see here that should really stand out to the board is that the average turnaround time on all permits coming out of our planning department is 9 days, right? 9 days. So not months, certainly not holding up housing development. And of all of the permits issued in the year, 97% of those were within timelines, and it's not always within the capacity of it's not always our team or any other conservation authorities team that's causing those delays too. So I think I just wanted, before this moves on, to recognize that for the board, for our team here, the great work that they're doing day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments, and well said. Thanks for the work during the past year. All those in favor of receiving the report, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I know at Owen Sound we are glad to be able to chip in the last year and enhance those numbers from our end. So at this time we are to item 9, which is the CAO's report. Back to Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it has been a busy month and a lot going on. I think what I'll start with is the one that's most pertinent to our business. So you'll recall at the last board meeting, I talked about the spring freshet and the amount of water that we had coming down, but April has had its own challenges. So on April 12th, the watershed received 2 to 3 inches, 50 to 70 millimeters of rain on that day. You may recall that. I believe it was a Sunday and it just didn't stop raining. Over the next 2 days, the 13th to the 15th, we received another almost 2 inches of rain within that period as well. Our soils throughout the watershed were already saturated from spring thaws, and runoff through most of our major watersheds again reached spring freshet levels, which is quite high. throughout some of our watershed, especially in the town of South Bruce Peninsula and Georgian Bluffs, we actually started to see pretty substantial flooding in some areas. So Gould Lake became very, very high, causing some roads to flood and getting close to houses for people. And that is just slowly dropping now. And that's also requiring the county to be pumping water out of that lake across the road to try and drop those levels. Skinner's Marsh and into Hepworth, there's a series of karst systems that connect those areas and substantial flooding. So we have record high flooding in Skinner's Marsh. We have a dam there, and the dam, I believe, was 4 feet underwater. So the dam had nothing to do with the flooding, because regardless of the dam, that was flooded, and it was causing pretty substantial flooding in Hepworth. Our Hepworth management area, otherwise known as Sawmill, is currently quite flooded at the front end, and substantial flooding has been going on in the village or hamlet of Hepworth, requiring pumping of that water again. And Shallow Lake as well have reached very, very high levels. We would like to extend our thanks on behalf of our team here and our flood forecasting team to the staff at South Bruce Peninsula and the staff at the Township of Georgian Bluffs. The communication between your teams and our team has been excellent, and it makes everyone's job a lot easier when we can have that open communication. So thank you. Some of the other items that have been going on, I was invited down to King City a couple of weeks ago to speak at Conservation Authorities University to some future CA leaders on strategic planning and the process that we went through, lessons learned, and so on. It was a great experience for me, and I think it was hopefully valuable for the attendees as well. I've taken and had the time over the last month to meet with several of our partners in one-on-one meetings, whether that's municipal CAOs or the CEOs of other partner organizations. And that's been really positive, and we're seeing a lot of support from our partners too, in terms of the changes that are coming right now. Both support in terms of the comments they're providing, but also just support back to us and our team. I've met with the other CAOs in the Lake Huron Regional Conservation Grouping, so that we can start thinking about what next steps are going to look like ahead of the province dictating these to us, so that we're helping to lead that process. I had the opportunity to speak on Rogers Health Link regarding these changes, and then, as I mentioned last night, I was at Owen Sound Community Services Committee to speak on it as well. So it's good to make sure that the public is getting this message, because it does tend to get buried beneath freedom of information changes and private jet sales and other things that tend to catch the media spotlight. We have onboarded a new staff person in our Conservation Lands Department. So as you're aware, Rebecca Anthony is on parental leave for the year. And so we've hired Stacey Evans to help us out for the year. And Stacey's hit the ground running, and she's doing a great job already. And hopefully maybe when we're back in our home building, you'll have a chance to meet Stacey. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that our environmental education team held our first Earth Film Festival under the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority banner, as opposed to the Foundation banner. And we took a different tack this year, which I think I've already described to the board. And so that was yesterday. It went really, really well. We screened 2 films, one of which the students themselves created with the help of some media companies. Great turnout, and we're already receiving great feedback on this. So a big shout out to our education team for a job well done. And that's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Are there any questions from board members? Member Ure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tim. So it's a good point you brought up. And again, I know we keep going back to the amalgamation, but so you did meet with the other members, the other CA bodies that are going to be impacted. Is that something that actually is governmental agencies are kind of recommending right now to get ducks in a row? Is this something that we just need to kind of grab the bull by the horns and do it, kind of be strategic? And obviously, and I guess the last point of that is, obviously, I'm presuming they're sharing the same concerns. When you're dealing with the other 6 agencies or other 5 agencies, again, some of them have higher pops. What are they saying? Are they expressing the same concerns? Because with them, with representation by population, they're going to actually have an advantage perceived. So is that kind of being discussed internally as being a pinch point for rural? Just again, the more that these intermediary bodies can get together and discuss, I'm hoping that's to our advantage, and I'm hoping that they're cooperative, I guess is lack of a better term, of just kind of how that's going.
Thank you through the chair. I would say it's the latter of whether, you know, we're taking the bull by the horns, because we haven't been provided with a lot of detail from the province at this point. So we're trying to talk frankly with each other about what do we see as the challenges and opportunities moving forward. I think I want to reiterate again, the one thing, or the most important thing to recognize here is the CAs, all of the CAs, none of us want this, but all of the CA staff are good people, like just like our team is here. So ultimately it'll be a good team if this does go forward. And so we're talking about, you know, the types of things that we're going to need to consider. At this point, it was an initial meeting, so very basic things like, you know, what benefits provider are you using, which pension, they're trying to figure out where we're going to have to start to align processes. And I'll be meeting with them again next week following Conservation Ontario's council meeting to carry on those dialogues.
Member Farmer.
Thank you. Through the chair, just following up on the update around flooding and wondering whether there's any known or negative impact to GSCA infrastructure on the properties impacted by that, knowing that at Sawmill there are buildings. I don't know if the Conservation Authority owns those or if the ski club does, but yeah, it's certainly deep there, having driven by recently.
Thank you, Member Farmer. Yeah, at Sawmill, we own the buildings, but they're managed and run by the ski club. They built them, but the way the agreements read is that once they're built, we own them. We do expect there will probably be some damage to those buildings, and we'll talk to the ski club about what that looks like once the water subsides. In terms of our dam structure at Skinner's Marsh, I don't believe at this point that there's any damage to the dam itself, but I do understand that we may have had damage to one of our new loggers that was installed there, because even though it was installed way above the dam, we didn't expect the water to reach at the levels that it did.
And through the chair, a follow-up question, if I may. I've been told by members of the community that some of the porta potties that were at the sawmill site floated out of the orientation you would have wanted them to be in. Is there anything that we should know about contamination to a site after an event like that, or does the nature of the problem wash that away for us?
Thank you, Member Farmer. I had the same question. So our team went out. Fortunately, those porta potties had been pumped very, very recently before that, and our team went out and made sure that it wasn't going to be a problem. And now the porta potties, I understand, have been removed from site as well.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. I'll go to Member Duvick. I've got two quick questions myself. Go ahead, Member Duvick.
Thank you. It's so not a question, but just a comment, because I don't think we've actually recognized it, but it's Earth Day today. So wanted to just wish, you know, our CEO and the board a happy Earth Day. And I couldn't think of a better way to spend Earth Day than being with the Greater Sauble Conservation Authority team. So happy Earth Day.
Thank you, and make sure you pick up any litter that you see in parking lots, trails, roadways, ditches. It's everywhere. Two questions. The first one, still circling back to the flooding. We certainly had an extraordinary amount of rainfall over a few days, and the soils were already saturated. In Owen Sound, we've got some considerable signs of beaver activity. Are we aware if there's any activity or dam building by beavers that the staff have recognized and could be contributory to some of the problems that arose this year?
I'm not aware of any, Mr. Chair. We had a report down at Williams Lake, which was quite high for a little while in Chatsworth. that there may have been a beaver dam. So our staff went and investigated that, and there was not. And the water has subsided there as well, but we're not aware of any others at this time.
Okay, thanks for that. Because as good as we humans are at building dams, we've got some pretty good competition in the beavers, and I certainly seeing all their activity right local to Owen Sound triggered the question. When you've met with your conservation counterparts within the proposed Lake Huron, we're aware of certain aspects you've been conversing with. Have you identified any, like, are there strengths that other or resources other conservation authorities have that you recognize and say, well, okay, we would be better if we had access to that technology or specific resources that we don't now, that we're not aware of. Just wondering, in terms of strengths and weaknesses, has there been conversation that has exhibited certain items particularly?
I think we will ultimately have those discussions, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Member Farmer, your hand's up, but I presume it was just by air. Okay. All right. So we are finished with the CAO's report. Under item 10, the chair's report, I have nothing to report at this time. So it is, oh, Member Day, go ahead.
Actually, I had a question for you, Chair. I had the privilege of being able to have a flexible timeline today and make it down to the Owen Sound marquetry ceremony. I just wondered if you wanted to speak to that Earth Day event at all. And I think marker trees are the type of ecological, cultural marker that don't necessarily follow municipal boundaries. So I was happy to attend, even though I live in a different municipality, and feel like there might be some relevance to Grey Sauble as well.
I'm glad you were able to make it down there for that tree, and I hope it was all dry, because a week ago that water line might have been approaching it much more so than currently. It is certainly a very unique tree that's at the back of Harrison Park, and yeah, it was certainly great that it was able to be done on Earth Day as well. So thanks for your attendance down there this morning. We are at, I was going to note the time is 2:39, and we do have a short closed session this afternoon. So if I may entertain a resolution to move into closed session, and then perhaps we'll just have a 5-minute break. Member Farmer has so moved, and a seconder, Member Dubik, has seconded. And any discussion? All those in favor of entering in